Welcome to EmpowerFuse with your host, Dr. Carolyn M. Rubin. EmpowerFuse is a show of empowering messages with a focus on encouraging self-confidence, resilience, and a positive mindset. Certified life coach and six-phase meditation trainer, Dr. Carolyn Rubin, will unleash inspiration together while igniting motivation and creativity. Dr. Rubin will discuss many topics such as healthcare, leadership, life, growth, and we'll add in some laughter too. So please welcome the host of EmpowerFuse, Dr. Carolyn Rubin.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for sharing this time with me today. Before we get started, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment where your heart is just breaking, yet people still need you to be strong? A moment where you were called to lead, even while you were still healing. A moment where your life demanded grit, while your soul longed for grace. Or a moment where your heart wanted to stay open, even when life gave you reasons to close. If your answer is yes, then you are in the right place today. Welcome to EmpowerFuse, unleashing inspiration together, where we ignite what's inside and amplify what's possible. I'm Dr. Carolyn Rubin, and today we are stepping into a conversation the world rarely teaches, yet our heart truly already understands. How to be strong without hardening and soft without breaking. Grace and grit are two forces the world often tries to separate. You're told to either be tough or be tender. You're told, be a lion or be a lamb. Or you're told to stand firm or surrender. But what if the power isn't in choosing one or the other, but in learning how they actually coexist? Because grace without grit, well, that becomes resignation. And grit without grace becomes resentment. But together, they become resilience with love. See, this conversation is about that sacred intersection. Strength anchored in compassion, and compassion reinforced with strength. Grace isn't weakness, and grit isn't aggression, but the power is found where the two meet. For women, grace and grit have never been concepts in conflict. They have been survival skills. We grew up learning to apologize for taking up space. We grew up learning to smile through disappointment, or to soften ourselves so others felt stronger. We also grew up learning to carry more than we were allowed to name. Yet, when the world needed steady hands, open hearts, fierce intuition, and unshakable truth, it was women who stood in the gap. You see, women raise families while building businesses. We juggle dreams and responsibilities. We lead teams while healing communities. We advocate for others while learning to advocate for ourselves. Grace has taught us compassion. Grit has taught us boundaries, but grace also has taught us empathy, while grit has taught us equity. Somewhere along the journey, we learned we can be powerful without being hardened and be loving without being invisible. There is a silent labor that women perform, the emotional labor of leadership. We hold families together. We hold teams together, faith together, while holding ourselves together. Our heart is not a hindrance to our calling. Our compassion is not competing with our capacity, and our sensitivity is not something to fix, but it's something to steward. You see, grace keeps our heart open, and grit keeps our spirit moving. There comes a time for every woman to make a decision. Where will I stand? Will I shrink? Or will I stand? Will I silence myself or speak truth with love? Will I carry this alone or allow grace to meet me in the ache? And often, before that breakthrough comes, there is a breaking. I like to look at this in phases. So the first phase is pressure, where grit becomes a mask. You learn to push through, perform through pain, to achieve through emptiness. You learn to smile through disappointment, and people see the strength. But only God saw the strain. The second phase I like to call the pattern. Grace was given, but never returned. You could feel the tug of war happening inside you. Part of you wants to fight harder, but part of you wanted to lay it all down. But neither felt right. It wasn't about being right anymore. It's about being aligned. So that takes us to phase 3, which is what I call the revelation. The moment of clarity. Maybe it's the stage that you were standing on. Maybe it's a speech that you're giving. Maybe it's a team that you are leading where you were finally seen differently. You stood there, not because you perfected strength, but because you surrendered the belief that strength meant doing it alone. Grit used to mean survival. Now it means stewardship. And that takes us to the fourth phase, the transformation. When grace and grit finally collided, you didn't become someone else. You became more you. You stopped forcing what wasn't meant for you. You stopped fighting battles God never assigned to you. And you stopped sacrificing peace to prove value. Why? Because you learned you could lead without hardening. You could love without losing yourself. You could stand without standing alone. You learned you could lead without hardening. You could love without losing yourself, and you could stand alone. I want you to think about this for just a minute. Think of a moment where you had to be stronger than you felt. And if you have your journal near you, grab your journal and write it down. Think of a moment where you had to be stronger than you felt. Think of a moment where you extended grace while still healing. Think of a moment where you extended grace while still healing. And think of a moment where choosing peace became your power. Think of a moment where choosing peace became your power. And while you have your journal, write this statement down. You learned you could lead without hardening. You could love without losing yourself, and you could stand without standing alone. So I want you to reflect back on that anytime you start to question. See, we cannot control everything, but we can control how we show up through it. And that is where grace meets grit. I'm going to ask you to place your hand over your heart. And I want you to take a deep breath in, count to 4, and then exhale, counting to 4. Ready? 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I want you to whisper this to yourself. And please write it down. I release what I cannot carry. I honor the woman that I was because she carried me here. And my softness is sacred. Again, I release what I cannot carry. I honor the woman that I was because she carried me here. And my softness is sacred. See, grace is seeing humanity before behavior. Grace is listening beyond words. What I like to call listening with our eyes. And grace is softening our delivery, but not our truth. And grace is allowing room to change, including ourselves. So grace is seeing humanity before behavior, listening beyond words, softening your delivery, not your truth, and allowing room to change, including you. Grace is spiritual maturity in motion. Grace does not mean that we're allowing repeated harm, nor does it mean we're avoiding conversations. Grace does not mean we're shrinking to keep peace, nor is it disregarding your own needs. See, grace isn't stepping away. Grace is stepping forward with clarity, understanding, insight. We listen with our eyes. We take grace. Let's see clearly. So grab your journal. I'm going to give you 4 questions to write in your journal, and then we're going to take a quick commercial break. Those 4 questions. Where am I extending compassion to others but denying it to myself? Where am I extending compassion to others but denying it to myself? Second question, what apology am I still carrying that no longer belongs to me? What apology am I still carrying that no longer belongs to me? Third question, what would change if I gave myself the grace that I give others? What would change if I gave myself grace that I gave to others? And in what area am I still punishing a past version of me? In what area am I still punishing a past version of me? See, we cannot give grace freely if we hoard it from ourselves. We'll be right back in a couple of minutes. Please reflect on those 4 questions.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals.
Welcome back, everyone, to EmpowerFuse, Unleashing Inspiration Together. We just spoke about what grace is, but now let's talk grit. You see, grit is not grinding. Grit is not busy. Grit is the decision to remain aligned when adversity pressures you to abandon your assignment. It's holding the boundary. Grit is trying again, but in a different way. And grit can also be getting up slower, but at least we're getting up. When we think about grit, it's also believing when evidence is delayed and moving without applause. Sometimes grit can be loud. Sometimes grit can be silent. And quiet grit is sacred. I want you to declare this with me. So grab your journal because I'm going to ask you to write this down so you can reflect back on it. I can do hard things with a soft heart. I am unlearning the belief that strength requires coldness, and my strength is not accidental. It is ancestral. Repeat that. I can do hard things with a soft heart. I am unlearning the belief that strength requires coldness, and my strength is not accidental, it is ancestral. Grace will ask, how do I honor God myself and others in this moment. Grit asks, what does truth require? Even if it's uncomfortable. Grace without grit can be enabling. Grit without grace can be an estrangement. But when you take grace and grit and add them together, you have empowerment with dignity. You move mountains, you move forward. And when you lead, there are times you lead with grace. And there are times that we need to lead with grit. But many times we lead with both. But let's talk about a few of those opportunities where you may just lead with grace only, or you may have to lead with grit. See, if you have someone that's learning, you want to make sure you're leading with grace. You want to teach them, train them, give them opportunities to become the best version of themselves. But if someone is repeating, then you may have to lead with grit in order to make sure that they're getting where they need to go, that you're helping them through, but yet leading them with a little bit more determination. Let's talk about when a decision is unclear. They didn't get the directions right. Maybe they didn't quite follow what you had in mind, but we lead with grace. And we help them understand what the challenge was or where they needed to take a different direction. But what if a boundary was crossed? If a boundary is crossed, that's where you're going to want to lead with grit. Because you have to be more direct and help them understand the right and wrong. And we lead with grace when a relationship matters. And taking time to understand that we both have faults, but we lead with grace and understanding. But when a value is violated, we will lead with grit. When our heart is reactive, we lead with grace. But if our peace is at risk, we are going to lead with grit. We are going to fight. If our peace is at risk, we are going to take that stand. So understanding there are times that it's going to be where you want to lead only with grace. But there are also times when it's very necessary that you lead with grit. Many times we lead with both. I want you to grab your journal. And I want to talk about grace and grit. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. In this season, my heart needs more grace in what? In this season, where does your heart need more grace? And in this season, where do you need more grit? So what's the question? In this season, I need more grit toward what? So in this season, my heart needs more grace in. And in this season, I need more grit toward. Third question for me, grace will look like, for me, grace will look like. So what does that look like for you? And for grit, for me, grit will look like. What does that grit look like for you? What does grace look like and what does grit look like for you? When does that come into play? See, leadership is not one speed. So wisdom that we shift gears with intention. We have the ability to stand strong. We have the ability to combine grace and grit and to have the understanding of when we need to use only one or the other based on the circumstances that we are coming up against. Leadership comes into play when we understand the time to use grace, the time to apply grit, and the time to imply both. We can lead with compassion, yet still provide guidance. So when we talk about what is grace and what is grit, it goes back to wisdom, it goes back to knowledge, and back to the fact that we can have both. And what happens when women lead with both? When grace meets grit. What happens when grace meets grit? Trust will grow. Your teams will look up to you. Your family will look up to you. The work that you're doing becomes more compassion because the trust grows in what you're doing. When women lead with grace and grit, communication heals. We can close that communication gap. When we lead with both grace and grit, we're able to heal the wounds from maybe a mistaken conversation or a tone we didn't mean to use or a lack of communication. When we use both grace and grit, we can heal that communication. We can also strengthen our boundaries. When women lead with both grace and grit, we strengthen the boundaries that have been set. Now, those boundaries might be with your family, with your friends, with your work, with your team. But we strengthen those boundaries with the way that we present ourselves, the way that we handle or manage a situation, with the conversations that we have to help build knowledge, to help build others up, to provide the training and the strength that others might need. When women lead with both grace and grit, the healing accelerates. There are times that if we only use grit and come down on people and we don't help them grow, they are going to move. They're going to leave. They're going to turn elsewhere. But when we lead with both grit and grace, we can accelerate that healing through the conversations that we have, through the motions that we provide, through the guidance that we give. And when we lead with both grace and grit, leadership will expand. You will start having conversations that you were wishing for all along but never had. Because people start trusting you. People know that you will communicate with them. People know that it's going to be an opportunity to learn, to lead. And when women lead with both grace and grit, Our legacy begins. Legacy begins while we're still here. Because the legacy is what we're leaving behind in those that we lead, the growth that we provide to them, the strength that we give to them, the grace, as well as the grit to help them grow. You see, we're not just building careers. We are building legacy in real time. Grace meets you where you are. And grit carries you where you're called. So remember, when we lead with both, we are building legacy in real time. I want you to grab your journal because I'm going to have you write this down, because I want you to declare this. And I want you to read through this every day. First one, I am a leader who carries both heart and strength. I am a leader who carries both heart and strength. I can be compassionate without being diminished. I can be compassionate without being diminished. And I can stand firm without losing my tenderness. I can stand firm without losing my tenderness. And the last one, I was created to embody both. I was created to embody both. Please reflect on those 4 statements while we take our last commercial break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality? But it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating. Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like, it was almost instant. Like, I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. Yeah, it feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to EmpowerFuse, Unleashing Inspiration Together. Thank you for joining me today. We've had so much fun talking about grace and grit, and we're not done yet. We're going to talk about your life is your leadership. And when you think about it, grace and grit is not a technique. It's a transformation. When we show up differently, people feel different. People respond differently. The world around you will shift. If you have been just providing grace or grit, today we've talked about how you put the two together. Because when you provide and you live with grace and grit, it is a transformation. That's legacy in real time. People will notice the difference in how you show up, in how you help others grow, in how you help others become a better version of themselves, or the version of themselves that they want to be. And at the same time, we're growing ourselves. We are giving ourselves permission to use both grace and grit. I have an assignment for you that we'll talk through, but I want you to write this down in your journal. Because I want you to identify a conversation that you've been avoiding, and that can be with yourself or someone else. So identify a conversation you've been avoiding, either with yourself or someone else. And then I want you to approach it with grace for the heart and grit for the truth. So whether that conversation is with yourself or someone else, I want you to approach it with grace for the heart and grit for the truth. And then afterwards, I want you to journal a response to these 4 questions. What did I learn about myself? So after you've had that conversation, what did you learn about yourself? And what did I protect? I want you to write down, what did you protect? Peace, identity, or boundaries? So what did you learn about yourself, and what did I protect? Peace, identity, or boundaries? Then I want you to note, how did grace guide you? So the question is, how did grace guide me? After you've had that conversation, how did grace guide you through that conversation? And how did grit empower you through that conversation? Remember, the approach is grace for the heart and grit for the truth. So how did grace guide you? And how did grit empower you? As we step in to each week, we know this truth. You're not too soft. You're soothing. Softness is where God whispers peace to chaos. Softness is where compassion becomes influence. Softness is where hearts are healed, and that's going to include your own. You are not too strong. You are steady. Strength is not the absence of emotion. It is clarity to keep moving with emotion. It is the spine that holds the vision when circumstances try to steal it. Again, remember, you're not too soft, you are soothing. You're not too strong, you are steady. And you are not too emotional, you are spiritually intelligent. Your intuition is insight. Your empathy is wisdom. Your tears are prayers, and your voice is generational. Because when grace meets grit, women don't just make it through seasons, they shift them. They change culture. They rewrite narratives. They model love without surrendering truth. So remember, you're not too soft. You're soothing. You're not too strong. You are steady. You are not too emotional. You're spiritually intelligent. The world is not waiting for your perfection. The world is transformed by your presence. When grace meets grit. So go forward with a backbone of steel and a heart full of tenderness. Go forward with a voice of clarity and a legacy of compassion. Walk out this week and every other week anchored in one unshakable reality. Your grace is your power. Your grit is your voice. And together, they will make you unstoppable. Your grace is your power and your grit is your voice. And together, they'll make you unstoppable. And remember, when grace meets grit, you don't just ignite. You become the spark that ignites others. Thank you so much for joining me today on EmpowerFuse. I hope you have a fabulous weekend with your friends, family, and loved ones. And until next Saturday, stay blessed. Bye-bye.
This has been EmpowerFuse with your host, Dr. Carolyn M. Rubin. Join us each week as Carolyn brings individuals together to share ideas, to collectively support each other, and to spark inspiration. Saturdays, 11 a.m. Eastern.